Thank you for tuning in, World of Railways viewers. It seems like the pandemic is a distant memory, but its consequences have impacted the finances of many businesses, with the leisure industry taking one of the biggest hits. Here to explain the impacts on one of the UK's premier heritage railways running between Bridgnorth in Shropshire and Kidderminster in Worcestershire is the Severn Valley Railway's Managing Director, Jonathan Dunster. Jonathan, thanks for joining us. So you've not been in the job too long, and you've arrived somewhat in the deep end, so to speak. Tell us about some of the immediate challenges facing the SVR.
Yeah, of course, Howard. Yeah. Thanks very much for the opportunity to talk to you today. So yeah, the SVR is like all heritage railways facing considerable commercial and financial challenges at the current time. And I think just to sort of put that into context, that goes back really to about January of last year to 2022, the beginning of 2022, where I think like the rest of society, we were all eagerly anticipating the final end of COVID restrictions and society sort of getting back to normal. And that all businesses, I think, were planning in that manner, and we were certainly no different. But what we quite soon discovered was that 2022 was not going to see a return to normality in the way that we'd all hoped. The first impact, really, the first issue was the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And you might think, well, what on earth has that got to do with heritage railways? But of course, the issue that caused was interruption to coal supplies, because a lot of coal comes into the UK from former Eastern European and parts of the former Soviet Union. So the interruption of supply to begin with caused the usual supply and demand impact, i.e. the price went up, and whilst we were still able to source coal, the price went up almost threefold, from about £150 a tonne to over £400 a tonne. So, a very, very substantial increase in costs there that we just have no control over at all. And then as we move sort of into the middle part of 2022, initially we'd seen some quite strong performance with our special events at the beginning of the season, things like our Spring Enthusiast Galas, both for steam and diesel enthusiasts. But once those had been completed, what we started to see during the course of the main summer season was that visitors on what I would say to be normal days were substantially fewer than we'd expected to see. And the problem there, of course, was that really the cost of living and inflationary pressures were starting to really impact on people's disposable income. I think there's probably another sort of subsidiary factor to that as well, because the availability of sort of package holidays in Europe started to appear again. So for some family visitors in particular, there was the appeal to go abroad again, despite the difficulties at airports. But for the slightly older age groups, and other family visitors staying in the UK, the cost of living crisis was really starting to apply. And then the third and final not nail in the coffin, but you know what I mean, last year was the utility costs, which we've all borne, I think, as householders. But electricity in particularly, really hit us hard, and our electricity costs went up from about £180,000 to nearly £500,000. So it was very difficult, obviously, to deal with all those additional costs at the same time, and all outside of our control.
So to combat all of this, you've launched recently the Severn Valley Railway Survival Fund, as you've called it, which sounds quite serious. Are things really that bad?
Well, they could be if we let them get that bad. I would say this is all about making sure the railway is resilient for the future. So the combination of all the things I've just explained to you about the difficulties we encountered last year and that are still ongoing, coupled to the legacy of COVID, means that our quite substantial cash reserves that we'd carefully built up, in the period leading up to 2019, are almost completely depleted now. So I think any responsible business needs to look at that very carefully and decide what to do about it before you get into a much more difficult situation. So we took the view that now is the right time really to make it clear to our supporters and new members and other interested people that we needed to shore the railway up, to make sure it was back to, as far as possible, a resilient position. And if you haven't got a good cash reserve, my experience with heritage railways are that you're very much at risk, because we all know that unpredictable things can happen. It doesn't matter whether it's weather related or infrastructure issues, which I know you want to talk about later, or indeed general economic factors. We need to have that level of resilience, so we want to build that back up.
Yeah. Now, with increasing pressures, as you alluded to, on the price of fossil fuels, can you see a directional change in the balance of steam versus diesel traction on the line in the future?
Well, not really, Howard. No, I mean, this year we're running almost 50% diesel and steam on our sort of non-event days. I mean, that's more for economic reasons rather than anything else. I think heritage diesel locos do have a part to play in heritage railways. I think prior to the pandemic, when we were running sort of 80% steam and 20% diesel, that balance is probably the right one. But interestingly, through other circumstances, I mean, last year we had very dry weather, so we had to take steam off altogether for periods. And in the current situation that we're in, general visitors who are not necessarily railway enthusiasts, and of course they are the majority of our visitors, are not as badly disposed to heritage diesel locomotives as you'd be led to believe, as long as you explain a bit more about the history of them, and as long as also there are still some steam locos in operation. So we found, even last year where we had to take steam off altogether, that there is a reasonable interest in heritage diesels. Now, you'd never ever want to go to that extreme as a rule, but if you have to do it and you explain it, it's understood. And I think when you talk to family visitors, particularly where you've got adults in their late 30s, early 40s, people that are far too young to even remember steam or their parents talking about steam, they are drawn to the whole experience on the railway. It's not just about the locomotive, it's about the carriages, it's about the stations, it's about the whole atmosphere. And I think sometimes the heritage railway movement can be a bit too focused on locomotives and forget about the rest of the experience. Because corridor rolling stock, for example, we've got many examples of corridor coaches here. People are very much drawn to those. It doesn't matter sometimes if it's for the Harry Potter influence or just the genuine novelty of a train with compartments. But visitors I talk to are very much interested in the whole experience, not just the locomotive.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I really want to talk about is in recent times the SVR painted Tor Valley purple to celebrate the late Queen's Jubilee, sending enthusiasts on the internet into somewhat of a frenzy. So for 2023, tell us about some of your highlight events to attract visitors to the line. What can we look forward to?
Well, I mean, we'll stick on the theme of Tor Valley for a moment, Howard, because as you know, Tor Valley's been repainted again. It's in the sort of final year of its current operational cycle at the moment, and we've taken the opportunity to paint it in another sort of what if livery, southern wartime black livery. Now again, that's not necessarily to everybody's liking, but it is a historical what if. It could have potentially carried that livery, and I think when we talk about locomotive liveries, they are very good at attracting attention. I mean, Tor Valley was remarkable last year. It was very tastefully done, and whether or not a small minority of authenticity purists like it or not, I'm not really too bothered about that, because paint is not permanent. It can just as easily be removed as it can be applied. So none of these things are ever permanent, but it certainly grabbed the headlines for us last year, and I welcomed it as an initiative. I thought it was very tastefully done. And similarly this year, we've been operating it now. It was in operation last week, and it's capturing attention. So that's good, because it's attracting people to the railway. In terms of other things that we're doing to attract people to the railway, I mean, we've run, as you probably know, we've run some pretty spectacularly successful enthusiast events, and we're very pleased with the results of those. But looking ahead, we've got the return of our 1940s weekends coming up later this month, and the first weekend in July as well. We've not run that for a number of years. Always traditionally very popular, not just with people that are interested in railways, but people that are interested in that period in history and the reenactment and the music and all this type of stuff. So we're looking forward, hopefully, to that being as successful as it was, or even perhaps more successful, because we've created a little bit more capacity in what we can do there. And we've put on quite a number of sort of family-related theme events, throughout the year, because we have to remember that we are a visitor attraction at the end of the day, and we've got to be relevant in the West Midlands and wider area. And we've got quite a lot of competition, not from other railways, but from lots of other attractions. So, for example, last week we had a a dinosaur-themed, event on at the Engine House at Highley, which I know for a fact, was very, very popular with a lot of people that went. So, again, they may not necessarily chime with, heritage railway enthusiasts, but the SVR, like all other attractions, has got to widen its target audience to be successful, in my view.
Absolutely. Now, striking the right balance between investment in infrastructure and locomotives and rolling stock has got to be at the heart of running the line. You've recently invested in new station facilities at Bridge North and a new roof for the locomotive stabling shed. Can you see, is that pretty safe for now? Are there any likely to be any other significant infrastructure investments required in the sort of short to medium term? I mean, the line does have some very large viaducts and bridges.
Yeah, so you can always be investing in infrastructure, Howard, to be honest with you. It's Victorian infrastructure largely, and it needs to be carefully inspected and maintained. So in addition to the projects that you mentioned there, of course, we did Falling Sands Viaduct 2 or 3 years ago, which is the most substantial viaduct on the line. But you're right, we have several others. We have the 2 viaducts at Bewdley, we have Ball Viaduct, just on the county boundary between Worcester and Shropshire, and all these need to be carefully inspected and maintained. And there are going to be some interventions required on all 3 of those viaducts in the reasonably near future. And we've got some fairly substantial buildings as well, which the main one being our Carriage and Wagon Works here at Kidderminster, the former Pickford's building as it's called. That is going to need some further investment, or indeed, in the future we may need to consider replacing that building because, it's a very difficult building to maintain, particularly given its proximity to the Network Rail network. So the answer to your question in one word is no, you never stop on infrastructure maintenance. Track renewal is an ongoing issue as well. So there's always something to do with infrastructure.
For those watching this, if you would like to donate to the Severn Valley Railway's Survival Fund, you'll find the details in the description below on how you can donate. And Jonathan, thank you very much for your time today. It's been a very interesting insight into the challenges that you must have on your shoulders and your team as well as a whole. Wish you all the best for it through 2023 and beyond. Thank you.
Thanks, Howard.
Enthusiasm for railways large and small? What a wonderful hobby this is. Why not do something about it? But where to start? How do you get to the heart of the hobby, get closer to the action at exhibitions, discover better ways of making things, new products, and go behind the scenes at some of the UK's biggest railway attractions? Simple, a membership that delivers all this and more. Get every new issue of BRM, Traction, Engineering in Miniature, Narrow Gauge World and Garden Rail magazines before they arrive in shops. That's 5 magazines, and that's just the start. Access more than 800 back issues with the ability to search for articles. A growing archive of track plans for project inspiration. Exclusive behind-the-scenes videos. Win big with our monthly competitions. And gold membership to the online forum RM Web. Plus you get a free show ticket to one of our great weekends out. The Festival of British Railway Modelling, the London Festival of Railway Modelling, and Bristol Model Railway Exhibition. We think our digital subscription is the best, but don't take our word for it. Activate your no obligation free trial today and try for yourself. Simply give it a go and decide after you've sampled all the benefits. The ultimate digital subscription for the railway enthusiast, getting you to the heart of the hobby.